Αγαπητοί τηλεθεατές, καλησπέρα σας. Καλωσορίσατε στην εκπομπή του Hellenic TV, Ομογένεια εδώ Λονδίνο. Απόψε θα σας παρουσιάσουμε τις πιο σημαντικές εκδηλώσεις που έγιναν πρόσφατα στην παροικία του Λονδίνου. Να σας υπενθυμίσουμε ότι οι τηλεθεατές μας από το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο μπορούν πλέον να παρακολουθούν από το κανάλι 110 στα Freeview την ελληνική τηλεόραση του Λονδίνου, καθώς και το τοπικό κανάλι Hellenic TV1 και ολόκληρη την πλατφόρμα του που περιλαμβάνει 14 ελληνικά κανάλια από Ελλάδα και Κύπρο και πρόσφατες κινηματογραφικές παραγωγές. Επίσης, να σας ενημερώσουμε ότι το Hellenic TV πρωτοπορεί τεχνολογικά και οι τηλεθεατές μας πλέον μπορούν να παρακολουθούν από τα κινητά τους τηλέφωνα. Περισσότερες πληροφορίες θα μπορείτε να βρείτε στην ιστοσελίδα www.visiontvnetwork.co.uk. Αν θέλετε να αποφεληθείτε αυτής της μεγάλης ευκαιρίας και να διαφημιστείτε στα Freeview, αλλά και στα κινητά σας μέσα από το Hellenic TV, επικοινωνήστε μαζί μας στο τηλέφωνο 020 82 92 70 37 ή στην ηλεκτρονική μας διεύθυνση info@hellenictv.net. Στο απόψινό μας πρόγραμμα θα δείτε τη διάλεξη που διοργάνωσε η εφημερίδα Παροικιακή για την οικονομία, τη χωροεσπερίδα του Συνδέσμου Ελεούσα Λονδίνου και τέλος θα σας παρουσιάσουμε τη μεγάλη δουλειά του γνωστού μουσικοσυνθέτη Λάρκου, ο οποίος έχει μελοποιήσει ποίηματα του Βασίλη Μιχαηλίδη και έχουν ερμηνευτεί από γνωστούς καλλιτέχνες. Ας ξεκινήσουμε με το πρώτο μας θέμα. Την Πέμπτη 10 Μαΐου, η εφημερίδα Παροικιακή διοργάνωσε στο Κυπριακό Κοινοτικό Κέντρο στο Wood Green διάλεξη στα αγγλικά με θέμα την οικονομία. Κεντρικός ομιλητής ήταν ο ηγέτης του Δήμου Merton, κύριος Στήβεν Αλαμπρίτης. Την έναρξη της διάλεξης έκανε ο Πάμπος Χαραλάμπους, ο διευθυντής της εφημερίδας Παροικιακή, ο οποίος καλωσόρισε το κοινό στη διάλεξη. Ο κύριος Χαραλάμπους ευχαρίστησε τον κύριο Στήβεν Αλαμπρίτη για τη θετική ανταπόκριση και για την ενημέρωση του κοινού της παροικίας σχετικά με θέματα που αφορούν στην παγκόσμια οικονομία και όχι μόνο. Η προσέλευση του κόσμου στην διάλεξη ήταν μεγάλη, ενώ μεταξύ των καλεσμένων παρευρέθηκαν και σημαντικά πρόσωπα της παροικίας του Λονδίνου. Θα παρακολουθήσουμε πρώτα το σύντομο χαιρετισμό του κύριου Χαραλάμπους.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. We have with us the representative of the Cyprus High Commission to Cultural Councillor Kypros Charalampous. We have with us the Councillor Chris Ioannidis. We have with us the Deputy Chairman of National Federation of Cypriots in UK, Christodoulos Stylianou. Dear friends, on behalf of Paroikιακή, I would like to welcome you all on tonight's lecture on economy. We have with us a very distinguished speaker, Councillor Stήβεν Αλαμπρίτης, leader of Merton Council, the only Cypriot leader of a council and a former head of public affairs and a federation of small businesses group. I thank him very much for accepting our invitation to talk to us about the topic we believe that he's an expert on. He's an Arabipioti as well, and he proudly says that anyway all the time, so am I as well? Right. We have representatives of the Arabic Association as well here. Okay. Before I go any further, I would like also to thank the Cypriot Community Center for their hospitality. To the chair, obviously, and the management committee, and we extend our thanks to you all for being here with us tonight. Britain is facing one of the worst economic crises since the Great Depression in the 1930s. The economic policies of this government, right, is creating problems for the ordinary working individuals and, of course, for many businesses. We already had problems with the fact that the petrol prices have risen and, as a result, pushing the production cost up. That's a subsequent rise in inflation. To combat inflation, the cost of borrowing has to go up, resulting in more and more people losing their homes and more companies going under. This will create an unprecedented chain reaction for the worse. A couple of weeks ago, it was announced by the Statistical Office of this country that the economy has entered officially in a recession, with the country's gross domestic product shrinking by 0.2% in the first quarter of the year. The situation is getting from bad to worse, and the government has no answer. Let's hope that we get some answers from Mr. Alabrίτης tonight. Enough said. I will leave the experts to talk about the economy, but once again, I would like to thank everyone present, especially the two speakers, the speaker, Councillor Stήβεν Αλαμπρίτης.
Αμέσως μετά, στο βήμα ανέβηκε ο κεντρικός ομιλητής της διάλεξης, ο ηγέτης του Δήμου του Merton, κ. Στήβεν Αλαμπρίτης, ο οποίος μίλησε για τις τελευταίες εξελίξεις στην παγκόσμια οικονομία, αλλά και για την οικονομία της Βρετανίας και αναφέρθηκε στην πρόσφατη επίσκεψή του στην Κωνσταντινούπολη. Ακολουθεί ένα απόσπασμα από την διάλεξη.
Thank you very much, Pámbos, and thank you all for being here. And thank you to my Aradipkiotes. If you want to have a go at me, they won't be pleased. And I think that's why they're here. What I intend to do today is to, yes, talk about the economy, but yesterday was the Queen's speech, or Philip's speech as they call it today. And we'll talk about the Queen's speech because that has implications for the economy. Then referred to the budget some months ago, but nevertheless another key budget by the Chancellor George Osborne. Then look at some government successes and some government failures in the last 2 years. It is difficult to be in a coalition, but you do get problems in any government, what we call mid-term problems. So they're in their second year out of 5 years, and they have got some problems. And then I'll talk about China and about Greece as well, and how we need to be mindful where Greece has come first in many regards, and why we and the European community should be more forgiving of Greece today, rather than to demonise, lambast and criticise Greece, as is the case today. I'll also touch on my visit to Istanbul, to Constantinople, where I went to see the mayor of Istanbul, Ahmet Selamet, where I wanted to learn about local authorities in Turkey. As a Greek Cypriot, I was invited by the Turkish community in Merton. And as a result of that, I shall be going to see Mr. Galanos in Nicosia, who is the mayor of Amorhostos. So I need to go where I need to go, where the arguments need to be made, where I can learn most. But I think you may want to hear about my visit to Istanbul and to what we like to call Constantinople, but I went to Istanbul and saw the mayor of Istanbul Metropolitan Council. So, cultural councillor, councillors, guests, Bambo, thank you for the invitation. The Queen's speech, there's some criticism that the Queen's speech could have addressed the economic woes of the country. I think that's slightly unfair, but there should have been a bit more about help for industry, help for companies, and help for people in need. What there was a proper attack on directors' pay, high pay for directors. That should be levelled out. There should be good pay for successes, not good pay for failures. And over the years, including under Labour as well, we have to be fair, what's happened is that directors who have failed have been paid off with large amounts of money, and that's got to stop. So there was a bill to address directors' pay. In terms of the banks, who are primarily to blame for the woes that we went into in 2008 to 2010, many people say it was all down to the Labour government, that the Labour government bankrupted the nation. Yes, there were issues, there were problems, but also the global economic woes contributed to that. And if you look at the opposition during the years of the Labour government, either Conservative Party in particular and the Liberal Democrats, they wanted to match pound for pound the spending that the government was committed to. They didn't say in 2005 or 2006 that you're spending too much, we wouldn't spend as much. So it is important to be fair to everyone in that regard. But the banks were a huge problem. So there's a bill in the Queen's speech to split the bank's retail arm, the arm that you and I use, our current account, our savings account, our business loan accounts, our mortgage accounts, to split that function from their investment arm, what we call casino banking, trading, foreign exchange, commodities, buying goods ahead of time, buying goods behind you, in front of you, buying for 500 tons of sugar in 10 years' time. Those kinds of commodities, investments, so there will be a split. So if one has a failure, the investment side say, it will not impact on the retail side, so that the banks will be safer, and so one arm of them can fail. What happened in 2008 to 2009 is the system was such that the banks could not be allowed to collapse. Otherwise, the whole economy collapsed. So hopefully that bill will address the issue. There's a pensions bill that will make us work longer, pay more into our pension and get less out of it. Not very attractive. We work longer, we pay more in, and when we retire, we get less out of it. And that is a problem for us all, and that's why there was a strike today by the public sector, concerns about the pensions. Now, as Bumble said, I used to work in the private sector, in the Federation of Small Businesses, and there I saw the private sector in its good and its bad, and I didn't have any experience of the public sector. Now I'm the leader of a council, the London Borough of Merton, where we employ 4,000 staff, have a budget of £500 million. I can see the public sector in the way it truly is, and that is strong, and that is committed, and not very, very well paid. You've heard of the pay of chief executives of local authorities, and in my borough we have 5 out of 4,000 staff who get more than £100,000 each. Some local authorities have 20 or 30 or 50. So I think it's the 5 directors. So I see that, but I also see staff who've worked there for 20, 30, 40 years, technical staff, professional staff, and they work long hours in the public sector, and the pay is not great, but the pensions have over the years been more attractive. We have to agree that. And it's wholly unfair now to change the ball game and to take away some of their pension rights. So, but that is an area of concern that the Queen's speech is trying to address. On banks, you should be able to switch bank more easily after the Queen's speech. There's a regulation there that will allow you, if you want to switch bank from one to another, to switch banks more easily, whether it's a current account, a savings account, or a loan account. I think that's very, very important. The Queen's speech also allows people to share their maternity leave. So if mum is allowed a year off for having a baby, she can take just 6 months off and give the other 6 months to dad. So it's sharing maternity leave. That may be an issue for employers, but even this government, which had a problem with overly generous employment laws, is agreed that it may be a good idea to share that leave between mums and dads. What that means is 2 employers will be involved in the maternity situation rather than 1 employer as before. There will be the House of Lords reforms, so the House of Lords, more of them will be elected. So we have Lord Adonis, who's a Greek Cypriot. He used to be a cabinet minister. He's in the Lords, but increasingly the House of Lords reforms announced by the Queen's speech will be elected Lords, not appointed. So the power of patronage should wane. On the EU, the Queen's speech confirmed that the UK will not be part of the bailout, that the UK will not give money to Greece or to Spain or to France or to anyone. The UK will be out of the bailout, won't give direct money to any other country that's in trouble, may give money to the IMF, which George Osborne has done. He's given 10 billion, and we mustn't be too critical of the UK government, both in helping the IMF and in giving money to the overseas countries. Still a generous country in that regard. There was a bill to allow Croatia to join the EU, so the UK Parliament will allow Croatia to join the EU, but won't allow Croatians to come into the country. So they're going to be a bit tougher on that. So they've learned their lesson with the Romanians and all the others. So the UK will allow Croatia to come into the EU, but not so many Croatians to come into the UK. What was not in the Queen's speech was something that Barack Obama supported, which was gay marriages. This wasn't in the Queen's speech by David Cameron, and that shows a little wobble on the part of David Cameron. There was some talk that would be in the Queen's speech to allow people of same sex to get married, whether in church or civil. Obama has agreed that, and one would have expected Cameron to be first to agree, but the right wing of the Conservative Party is not happy with same-sex gay marriages, and they say that Cameron has given into them. There was nothing there about the recall of MPs. I don't know if you like your MP, if you don't like your MP. At this moment in time, you can't do anything about it until the general election. There was a proposal, if 10% of the electorate, so if 10% of the Greek Cypriot community got together in Edmonton and they didn't like Andy Love, that they could get rid of him in between the general election. Not that I want you to get rid of Andy Love. I think he's a nice MP. But there was a talk that would be in there. But you're stuck with your MPs until each general election. And there was talk that overseas aid would be looked at. This government is committed to giving 0.7% of its gross national product in overseas aid to India, to Malaysia, to Singapore, to developing countries. And there was a debate that India actually was going to send back its money, because some countries that we call developing countries are actually better off than us. But both Gordon Brown was very generous with overseas aid, but there was nothing there to cap it or to stop it. It was a campaign by the Daily Mail that why we're giving money to countries that are competing with us. India is now very, very affluent, but not all parts of India. And I don't know if you heard about the £30 billion project for a high-speed rail to Birmingham, where most Aradip Kodes are. You know, if you go to Birmingham, it's Aradipu. But it takes you currently 1.5 hours. But there was a proposal by Justin Green, the cabinet member for transport, to have a high-speed rail to Birmingham in 55 minutes. Your chips and fish and chips will still be warm, you see, on the way back, because that's what they give you. Fish and chips when you go to Birmingham. So there was no proposals for high-speed rail, Justin Greening. I think that's the money just may not be there. So the Queen's speech shows you a government in two minds, a coalition government. We must always remember that David Cameron has a difficult act to play insofar as he has to clear things with Nick Clegg. Coming on to the last budget, there is a lot of criticism that didn't address, as Bumbo said, the growth issues. People say that if Labour had been in, there'd be more help for businesses. So in 2008, when the economy was in some trouble, if you recall, there was the car scrappage scheme where you could hand in your old banger, your old Triumph Toledo, your Hillman Imp, your Cortina, and you could get £2,000 to buy a brand new car. That was Lord Mandelson, he introduced that. That was very helpful to the car industry. Then the Labour government then introduced the enterprise finance guarantee to give money to businesses that the government guaranteed. And so the accusation is that the last budget did very little. One thing it did do was something the Liberal Democrats wanted, was to raise the personal allowance. So next year and the year after, we can earn £10,000 before we pay income tax. At the moment, it was 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. That is help for the needy, so we need to acknowledge that. That is good. You earn more money before you start to pay tax. But then does one say, well, that's the Liberal Democrats pushing on George Osborne rather than a George Osborne idea. the Labour government introduced 50% tax for the very rich, for those who are very well off, earning hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's come down to 45p in the pound, and there was an expectation that that would have gone to 40p, but it went to 45p. Again, Labour would have left that for longer. Was this wise when the government needs money? And on VAT, Labour would have introduced a lower VAT for the construction sector and lower the VAT. But George Osborne decided to leave it at 20% and actually to introduce it on hot takeaway food from Greggs and Bakers. VAT on hot food takeaways was introduced in the 1980s, much to the dismay of the Greek community that had fish and chip shops and so on. And so there was VAT on that. But what didn't happen at the same time was VAT on hot pies. So you have the pasty scenario today. And Sunday trading laws will be relaxed during the Olympics. And this is what George Osborne said. So the big supermarkets will open every day, 24 hours throughout the Olympics. And that will not be good for the smaller businesses who enjoy a bit of an advantage on a Sunday when the big supermarkets close at about 4 o'clock. So let's look at where the government gets its income from. The vast majority of its money comes from income tax, then national insurance, then VAT, and then it's excise, cigarettes, beer, and so on. So that's where most of its money comes from. VAT, income tax, national insurance. Corporation tax is only 10%. VAT is 20%, and 25% is income tax. That's where it gets its money from. Where does the money go? Social welfare, 200 billion. Biggest chunk of the money. Social welfare, unemployment. And that's the criticism of the government, that unemployment is going up, so that bill will go up as well. Whereas the argument is that Labour would have done more to reduce unemployment, got people into work. Another big spender is health, 130 billion, the health service, National Health Service. Education, 90 billion. Defence, 40 billion. So these are big sums. So the government is getting money from income tax, national insurance, that's you and me, from companies, from VAT, from beer and smoking, and then it spends it on social welfare, unemployment, council housing, health, education, defence, 40 billion. And this is where one has to think whether George Osborne is right or wrong. He may be right, because the government is currently spending, so I've said 40 billion on defence, the government is currently spending 46 billion on paying interest on its debt. 46 billion to pay off the debt. The other argument is that after the Second World War, we had a higher debt than this one compared to the, and we built schools, we built new hospitals. So there are arguments. When you get two economists in a room, you get 10 arguments. And so, but that's why it's interesting. So the whole debate between Labour, the opposition, Ed Miliband, and George Osborne, David Cameron, and Nick Clegg is, at what pace do you try and cut back on the debt so you pay less interest on debt? So the accusation is that the government is too fast, too quick, and Labour would have done it over 2 parliaments. If Labour had gone in 2010, Labour would have done some of this difficult work, but it would have done it at a slower pace. It would have done it over 8-10 years, whereas the current administration believes that they can do it in 4 or 5 years. That is the debate. Whether they're right or wrong, we will be proved. So what's happening today in the economy? Base rates were kept at 0.5%. I mean, that's absolutely amazing. The basic rate of interest by the Bank of England is 0.5%. Repossessions are levelling, but I think that's because people are not buying houses. Unemployment is going up, especially amongst the young, which is a difficult one. Inflation is creeping up. If we look at other countries, China is doing well. Spain not so well, and I'll talk about Greece at the very end. The thing with China is it's doing very, very well. It's got more high-rate taxpayers than here in this country. So there are more people in China paying more tax than in this country. But it's going up this motorway and it's growing all the time. But with growth, at some stage you have to turn. You have to turn and pause or stop or take a breather. And we don't know whether it will be able to handle that as a country. But it is at this moment in time growing too fast and taking over a lot of our industries.
Εδώ να σας αναφέρουμε ότι ολόκληρη διάλεξη για την οικονομία θα μεταδοθεί την ερχόμενη Τετάρτη 23 Μαΐου στην εκπομπή με το φακό του Hellenic TV στις 7:45 το βράδυ.